Have you ever wondered why we feel what we feel? Or, why our bodies sometimes seem to betray our conscious intentions? Imagine a time, and it really wasn't that long ago, when the inner workings of the human mind were just this vast, uncharted territory.
Right.
Often dismissed as, well, purely physical ailments or moral failings, maybe even outright malingering.
Yeah, faking it. A patient with unexplained paralysis might just be seen as, well, putting it on.
Exactly. Or someone suffering from, say, intense debilitating anxiety might just be considered weak-willed.
And these weren't just like social stigmas, right? These were deeply entrenched medical views. The idea that there was a hidden inner world influencing health, largely ignored.
Or profoundly misunderstood at best.
For centuries, really. The mind was mostly seen through philosophy or religion. Maybe you'd acknowledge a nervous disposition, but that direct link between psychological distress and unexplained physical symptoms, overlooked.
So the shift towards actually investigating this scientifically, daring to explore those unseen influences, that was revolutionary.
Absolutely nothing short of it.
And that's exactly what this deep dive is all about today. We're focusing on the foundational ideas of Sigmund Freud.
Right at the very beginning.
Yeah, drawn directly from this amazing collection of his early papers, reviews, private notes, and maybe most intimately, his personal letters to his confidant Wilhelm Flies.
These Amor to One excerpts, they're a real treasure trove.
Absolutely. It's raw thought, where his most revolutionary concepts were just starting to germinate. So our mission today...
to kind of unpack that.
Exactly. To distill the most important nuggets, the key insights from these early sources. Give you, our listener, a shortcut to understanding how Freud's theories on neuroses, the unconscious, that whole mind-body connection, how it really began to take shape.
You'll hear about his struggles, his sometimes startling clinical observations, the surprising connections he was making.
Often in his own unedited words right from these private documents.
It's really a peek behind the curtain. A scientific mind in its most formative, most dynamic stage. Grappling with what he thought were the fundamental architectures of our psyche.
Okay, so to really get the magnitude of Freud's breakthroughs, we kind of need to understand the world he was operating in, the intellectual landscape. He wasn't just born the father of psychoanalysis, we know. Before he got into dream symbols and, the Oedipus complex, he was a medical doctor.
Yeah, a neurologist, fundamentally, trained in the most rigorous scientific methods of his day.
So what was that initial lens? How did he first look at the human condition?
That's a really crucial starting point. Freud began his career firmly rooted in the hard sciences, neuroanatomy, physiology. He spent formative years working under these really formidable figures in Vienna. Professor Ernst Wilhelm von Bruck, a top physiologist, and Theodor Meinert, a leading professor of psychiatry. So this background, this rigorous biological training, it profoundly shaped his initial approach.
But what's fascinating, and you mentioned this, is he wasn't just a scientist dissecting brains.
Exactly. That's what's often overlooked. Even while he's meticulously studying nerve pathways, he's also this profound reader of Greek and Latin classics, fluent in multiple modern languages: English, French, Italian, Spanish.
Wow. A true polymath, then. Bridging those two cultures, as they called them.
Absolutely. The precise empirical world of science and the rich interpretive world of humanistic study. You see it later, right? His literary allusions and the interpretation of dreams, they aren't just decoration.
No, they're integral, explanatory tools almost.
Yeah, parallels for his psychological theories.
So you have this blend, steeped in biology, focused on physical processes, but also this deep appreciation for human stories, inner life, emotion, the stuff of literature. How did these, seemingly disparate interests start to come together? What was the catalyst?
The catalyst really was his encounter with hysteria. Just this utterly perplexing phenomenon. The medical view at the time just struggled to categorize it. Many doctors dismissed it as malingering, faking it for attention.
Or worse, historically speaking, possession, witchcraft.
Right. So this lack of scientific understanding, it led to immense skepticism. And Freud's journey then took him to Paris on a travel grant, 1885-86.
To the Salpêtrière Hospital.
Exactly, the famous Salpêtrière, a massive institution like a city within a city. At one point, housing over 5,000 elderly women.
Incredible.
And it was here that Jean-Martin Charcot, his respected teacher, was trying to bring what he called grande history into a more scientific focus, attempting to systematize it, observe it, study it, basically give it some clinical legitimacy.
Charcot's Tuesday lectures. They must have been quite something. Almost theatrical, apparently, but with serious scientific intent, treating patients right there in front of an audience.
Oh, absolutely. And he meticulously categorized grand hysteria into specific phases, including hysteroepilepsy.
Which looked like epileptic seizures.
Strikingly similar, yeah. But Charcot painstakingly pointed out key differences. For instance, an epileptic might fall into a fire, get severely burned, but hysteric having a similar seizure, they'd often somehow manage to avoid serious injury.
Interesting. So not quite the same loss of control.
Exactly. But despite Charcot's efforts, a lot of the medical community, especially back in places like Berlin, remained deeply skeptical.
The source notes say a hysteric back then was almost as likely to be called a simulator as a witch or possessed in earlier times.
And that's how deep the skepticism ran. A diagnosis of hysteria could mean the patient was just abandoned, no further treatment, seen as a moral failing, not a real illness.
And this is where hypnosis comes onto the scene, right? Controversial, but a potential tool.
A pivotal tool, yeah. But also a lightning rod for skepticism, bordering on charlatanism in some eyes.
And Freud himself, he translated Charcot's lectures, didn't he? And Bernheim's work on suggestion.
He did, de la suggestion. To deepen his understanding, extend his stay in Paris. He saw that the fatal prescription, as he put it, against seriously considering hypnosis was finally starting to lift.
Thanks to people like Bernheim.
Bernheim, yes, arguing for suggestion. And Auguste Forel, who strongly championed scientific hypnotism.
And what's fascinating here is Freud's own courage, standing up to powerful figures.
Absolutely. He took a strong stance against Professor Meinert back in Vienna, hugely influential brain anatomist, but dismissed hypnotism as absurd.
And Freud said,
he basically asserted that respect for facts has to overcome respect for the great man. He pointed out that Forel, another distinguished brain anatomist like himself, did recognize the clinical validity of hypnosis. It wasn't just something to be scoffed at.
So, a commitment to observation over dogma, even early on.
A real hallmark of his approach.
So for Freud, hypnosis wasn't just a trick. It was a serious therapeutic and investigative tool. What did treatment actually look like then? Was it all mystical prance?
No, it was actually quite structured, clinically speaking. Though, yes, maybe dramatic for an audience watching Charcot. The duration of hypnosis, it was adjusted to practical need. Could last hours, sometimes.
And waking them up.
Relatively simple commands like, it's fine for now, often paired with specific suggestions, that the patient would wake up feeling well, no headache, cheerful, part of the therapy.
But Freud noticed something subtle, didn't he?
He did, a subtle but profound observation. Some patients, even after what seemed like a light hypnosis, they still reported feeling pressure, fatigue.
So it wasn't like real sleep.
Exactly. It suggested it wasn't a state of true restorative sleep, but something else entirely. Something purely mental, not physiological.
And that implies?
It implies the mind, even without direct physical intervention, could profoundly influence the body. That physical symptoms could be direct reflections of internal mental states, even unconscious ones.
The ability to alter physical symptoms with no clear organic basis, just through psychological means.
That became a cornerstone for him, understanding the unconscious mind.
Okay, so Freud's delving deeper, observing these baffling cases like August P., you mentioned him earlier.
Right, the engraver.
He starts to realize, okay, not all nervous diseases are the same. He hits this critical point where he just can't explain things like hysteria by looking for a physical lesion, brain damage.
Exactly. It forced him to ask a really fundamental question. How do you distinguish between an organic, physical paralysis and a hysterical, functional one?
Or just different types of mental suffering if the symptoms look so similar on the outside.
Right. He began to articulate this concept of a functional alteration without concomitant organic lesion. Basically, a change in function without any visible damage.
And he saw this in how the symptoms presented.
Precisely. Yeah. Hysterical paralyses, he observed, they didn't follow the precise anatomical pathways of nerve damage. They conformed more to a popular conception of the organs.
Meaning?
Meaning a patient might experience paralysis of their entire arm. Anatomically, that's highly unlikely from a single lesion. But it makes perfect sense from how a layperson thinks of an arm as a whole unit.
Ah, okay. So the symptom matches the idea of the body part, not the underlying neurology.
Exactly. And that distinction was crucial. It shifted the focus from just the physical brain to the more intricate psychological mind. Laid the groundwork for psychopathology.
Now, one of the common diagnoses back then, almost a catch-all, was neurasthenia. What did that mean for Freud? How did he start categorizing it?
He tried to approach neurasthenia as a specific thing, not just a vague term. He saw it characterized by this wide array of symptoms: chronic fatigue, digestive problems, headaches, eye strain, insomnia.
Sounds like a lot of modern complaints, too.
It does, and sometimes what he called a morbid anxiousness or intense self-consciousness. Crucially, he observed it could often be acquired.
Acquired how?
He frequently linked its onset to what he called sexual excess or derangements of sexual life. These specific harmful influences or noxes, practices like masturbation, coitus interruptus withdrawal, or coitus reservatus, holding back during intercourse.
And he noticed the symptoms could change.
Yeah, they were often variable, interchangeable. A headache might go away, but then digestive issues pop up, suggesting this diffuse, generalized nervous weakness.
And the case of August P., the engraver.
A harrowing case. Symptoms so severe: palpitations, suicidal thoughts, tremors, vision problems, memory loss. He was contemplating suicide. And he even had this hemianesthesia, loss of sensation on one side.
But it was labile.
Meaning its severity could be altered by electrical stimulation, which strongly suggested it was functional, not purely organic damage. His other complaints too: music in the ears, throat sensations, weakened memory. It all pointed to something non-organic but incredibly real in its impact.
Okay, so if neurasthenia was this broad category of nervous ability linked to these general sexual noxes, how did anxiety neurosis stand out? You said Freud began to specifically separate it.
He did. He really worked to separate anxiety neurosis from neurasthenia, arguing it was a distinct clinical entity with its own specific cause.
And its symptoms.
Persistent, pervasive anxiety, what he called anxiety referring to the body, like hypochondria, anxiety referring to a bodily operation, phobias like agoraphobia, claustrophobia, vertigo, and anxiety referring to decisions and memory, things like folie du doute, that compulsion of doubt or obsessive rumination.
And the crucial link, the cause he proposed.
Unlike the broader range of noxes in neurasthenia, he linked anxiety neurosis symptoms specifically to coitus interruptus in marriage or other very particular sexual noxes that prevented the natural physiological discharge of sexual excitation.
So a buildup of physical excitation.
That was his hypothesis. This specific practice led to an accumulation of physical excitation that couldn't find release and then transformed into the physical and psychological symptoms of anxiety, a direct, almost hydraulic causal link in his early thinking.
Can you give us a clearer example? The source has those letters to Fleiss.
Absolutely. That letter from October 1893 is key. He details several cases that helped him solidify this distinction. There's a 41-year-old woman with debilitating vertigo, agoraphobia, anxious expectation. Crucially, without other neurasthenic symptoms.
Pure anxiety neurosis, he called it.
Exactly. And he attributed it directly to coitus interruptus. Then another case, a 24-year-old woman, nocturnal pain, insomnia, linked to her husband's travels and her great anxiety of conception from coitus interruptus. He noted some hysterical elements there too, suggesting co-occurrence.
So it could be mixed.
It could. And even a 42-year-old man who developed severe anxiety attacks, cardiac collapse, fear of tongue cancer after his father died. The trigger was bereavement, sure, but the underlying factor, Freud argued, was the coitus interruptus he'd tolerated for years.
So the same noxa could have different outcomes depending on the person or circumstances.
Exactly. These varied responses led Freud to assert the specificity of effects. A revolutionary idea. Different underlying causes, different predispositions, even subtle ones lead to distinctly different types of neuroses. Not just generic nervous weakness. There was a hidden, precise logic.
Okay, let's turn back to hysteria. It seems like it held a particular fascination for Freud, almost a key to unlocking the unconscious.
Yeah.
How did his view evolve beyond Charcot's descriptions?
Yeah, it really moved beyond just seeing it as simulation or a purely physical thing. He started to see it as a perversion of the will.
Perversion of the will.
Meaning an unconscious contrasting representation, basically a counter-will, an opposing psychic force, was preventing the conscious intention from happening. The body would behave as if it didn't have the will to do what the person wanted.
So not a conscious choice to be sick, but an unconscious compulsion.
Precisely, coming from within. The source notes hysterics often had this excess of excitation, and this surplus energy could either block a desired action or stimulate an unwanted one, leading to these bizarre, paradoxical physical symptoms. The illness was, in a way, communicating something.
Can you give us a really concrete example of this counter-will? That tongue-clicking, canic anecdote is striking.
It really is. This lady had a peculiar tongue-clicking sound, a tic, for years. It would just erupt loudly, even when she consciously tried to press her lips together. Under hypnosis, she recalled the origin.
Which was?
The very first time it happened. Her sick daughter had finally fallen asleep, and her inner thought was this desperate command. Now you must keep absolutely silent so as not to wake her.
And the sound appeared then. The opposite.
Exactly. An ironic physical manifestation of the intense inhibition she wanted. Years later, during a thunderstorm, lightning hits a tree right in front of their carriage. Her thought, now you must not scream, for the horses would be frightened.
And the lunatic returned.
It did. Once this counter-will, this unconscious command not to do something, was uncovered and made conscious, the tic just vanished.
Wow.
It shows how an intended inhibition could manifest physically, doing the exact opposite of conscious desire. This demonic bias, he called it. Hysterics often acted contrary to their desires, compelled to do the wrong thing, get ill when they wanted health, a true perversion of character.
And it wasn't just motor symptoms, right? Sensory disturbances too.
Yes, and they were highly specific in ways that supported his psychological theory. Patients might get amaurosis, blindness in one eye, or amblyopia, weakness in both, but crucially, never hemianopsia, half-field blindness.
Which is a known neurological condition.
Right, caused by specific brain lesions. Hysterical vision issues also had peculiar color deficits, losing violet first, keeping red and blue longest. Similarly, hysterical deafness was almost always one-sided, often with numbness of the outer ear itself, not just an inner ear issue.
Again, pointing away from standard nerve damage patterns.
Exactly. Freud noted these symptoms revealed that popular conception of the organs, not anatomical precision. The symptoms matched how a layperson might think of their body. My whole arm is paralyzed. Not how a neurologist understands specific nerve pathways.
A powerful argument for a psychological origin, rooted in a mental representation of the body.
Absolutely. Not a physical lesion.
Okay, moving from hysteria's physical manifestations. What about paranoia? How did Freud understand this distinct, often terrifying condition?
Paranoia, for Freud, was a defense neurosis, but its core mechanism was different. It was rooted centrally in projection.
Projection, taking something internal and putting it outside.
Essentially, yes, an internal, incompatible representation. A painful, shameful, unacceptable thought or feeling isn't forgotten or converted into a physical symptom, like in hysteria. It's actively repressed by being externalized, attributed to the outside world.
He called it an abuse of a psychic mechanism.
Yeah, because projection itself happens in everyday life, right? We might externalize blame, attribute our mood to the weather.
I'm not angry. You're making me angry.
Exactly. The difference in paranoia is this becomes the dominant pathological way of processing unbearable internal stuff. It allows the content and the emotional charge, the affect, to be preserved, but its location shifts from inside to outside. It feels like a hostile external reality.
That's a really powerful idea. Could you give us a case illustration? How does that unbearable internal thought become an external delusion?
Yes, there's a compelling example he detailed. A sister who, after a disturbing encounter with a stranger when she was just 12, developed this profound delusion of being noticed and of persecution.
What did she believe?
She came to believe her neighbors pitied her for being an old maid, still waiting for that man from her past. Her mind, unable to reconcile the original experience or the intense self-reproach, maybe the internal thought, I'm a bad person or I'm unworthy, projected that very reproach outwards.
So she heard it from outside.
Exactly. She might even consciously say, I know it's false, but the delusion would persist for weeks, clear up, then return. It shows how an unbearable internal conflict, if too painful to integrate, could be disowned, attributed to others, and manifest as persecution. The torment comes from the world, not from within.
And this mechanism isn't unique to that one case.
No, he saw it elsewhere, too. An alcoholic struggling with impotence from drink might find it unbearable to acknowledge, so instead develops a delusion of jealousy, blaming his wife, externalizing his shame.
Or a hypochondriac.
Right. Unable to accept his illness stems from his repressed sexual life, maybe believes he's being poisoned, finds an external, tangible cause for internal psychic suffering. Or the unpromoted official imagining a conspiracy instead of confronting failure.
The paranoia becomes a psychosis of defiance.
That's what he called it. The delusion asserts the opposite of the repressed fact. It makes the projection correct within the patient's delusional reality. It's a distorted but powerful protection for the ego against an unbearable internal truth.
Okay, so these incredibly detailed clinical observations, the patterns in neurasthenia, anxiety neurosis, hysteria, paranoia, They didn't just lead Freud to describe them. He felt compelled to build a grand theory.
Yeah, to understand the underlying mechanism.
Not just categorizing, but figuring out how it all worked. Which brings us to this early, really ambitious theoretical undertaking, the project for scientific psychology.
Ah, yes, the project. It's one of the most remarkable, maybe least understood parts of his early work. Around the mid-1890s, he just immersed himself in this.
And the goal was?
Audacious, really. To describe all psychic processes in purely quantitative terms, like a biological machine governed by physics. He wanted to conceptualize them as controlled states of verifiable material parts.
Make psychology intuitive and free of contradiction, like neurobiology.
Exactly. Or even classical mechanics, explaining everything: perception, memory, thought, neurosis through the flow, transformation, discharge of this hypothetical quantity of excitation, or Q.
And he never published it.
No, he left it unpublished in his lifetime. But it gives us this amazing window into the foundations of his scientific thinking. That's why the source notes mention the difficulty translating his telegraphic style, the abbreviations, the revisions.
It shows the stratification of his conceptions.
Yeah, his tireless struggle to refine these ideas into a coherent, scientific system. It was truly a blueprint for a mind as machine theory.
So he wasn't just using metaphors. He literally imagined the mind like a nervous system, a complex circuit board with different kinds of neurons.
Precisely, a highly specific neuronal framework. He proposed 3 distinct kinds of neurons, each managing this quantity of excitation, Q.
Okay, what were they?
First, fire neurons. These receive Q mainly from external stimuli. Their key feature: rapid discharge, no resistance at their contact barriers. His early idea of synapses. Their job was immediate perception, registering input without holding on to it.
Like a light switching on and off.
Exactly. No trace left. Crucial for his later distinction between fleeting conscious perception and enduring unconscious traces.
Okay, second type.
Psi neurons. These received Q mainly from internal sources, and critically, they built up resistance at their contact barriers. This resistance let them form permanent traces of excitation.
Memories, basically.
Essentially, yes. Psi neurons dealt with internal processes, retained information, could bind and store energy, the basis of enduring psychic life.
And the third type?
Omega neurons, specialized psi neurons. And it was here, in this system, that consciousness itself arose.
Wow.
Freud believed consciousness wasn't just about quantity, but quality. Arising from the coincidence of these minimal quantities with the faithfully transferred quality from the sense organs, it was this elaborate distinction trying to bridge material processes and subjective experience that laid the groundwork for his later concepts. Unconscious, pre-conscious, conscious, a very early attempt to scientifically ground awareness itself.
It sounds incredibly intricate, but also, yeah, very mechanical. Inputs, outputs, storage. What was the driving force, the fundamental principle?
It really was a kind of energetic psychology. The system's fundamental drive was what he called the principle of neuronal inertia, meaning the drive to discharge Q to maintain a 0 level of excitation. The nervous system constantly trying to rid itself of stimulation, return to quiescence. Any buildup of energy was a deviation, triggering mechanisms to restore balance.
So the goal is avoid pain, seek pleasure by reducing tension.
Pretty much. Internal forces were often seen as secondary reactions to external stimuli, or to the problematic buildup of internal energy that couldn't get out. It was highly deterministic, driven by energy flow, not complex psychological motivations as we think of them later. The mind as an energy-regulating machine.
How did something like pain fit into this quantitative model? Was it just a glitch?
Pain in this model was seen specifically as a failure of the system's protective mechanisms. Normally, at the nerve endings, especially of the phi neurons, you had these screen devices. Exactly. Crucial filters, preventing excessive Q from overwhelming the phi and psi neurons. The first line of defense against sensory overload. Pain happens when hypertrophic Q quantities of excitation just too large, exceeding the threshold break through these screens.
So an overload, a breach in the defenses.
That's right, a quantitative overload where the normal mechanisms fail. But what's really interesting even here is how he connected this to managing pain in real life, foreshadowing later ideas.
How so?
He observed that distracting attention could remarkably reduce the experience of pain. He gave examples: a warrior in the fever of battle not feeling his wound, or a martyr consumed by religious fervor insensible to torture.
Suggesting the mind's focus matters.
Yeah, that active attention could directly influence the experience of physical sensation, either diverting the cue away from pain neurons or maybe somehow reinforcing those protective screens. A profound early nod to the mind-body connection even within this quantitative framework.
Okay, building on this mechanical view, how did he explain something as complex as desire? Or even thinking itself? Seems like a big leap from just quantities of excitation.
It is, but the way he bridged it is quite ingenious. Desire, for him, starts with an experience of satisfaction.
Look at baby being fed.
Exactly. Take a hungry infant. The endogenous stimulus, hunger, is satisfied by feeding. This leaves a lasting memory image of the satisfying object, the breast, the milk, the feeling, stored in the sign neurons.
Okay.
When that internal need, that hunger, arises again, the internal excitation increases. It animates that stored memory image, leading to what Freud called a wish-perceptual hallucination. The mind conjures the image of satisfaction as if it's real.
But if it's not real, if the object isn't there...
That leads to disappointment. The expected discharge doesn't happen. Energy remains unbound.
And this disappointment is key.
It's the very force that drives the emergence of thinking or judgment. Thinking, for Freud here, is born from this dissimilarity between the desired memory image and actual perception. The mind performs mental work to find congruence, bridge that gap.
How?
By breaking down perceptions into constant thing components, the stable essence of an object, and variable predicate components, its changeable activities, properties.
Like a toy car. Car is the thing, moving, red, broken are predicates.
Exactly. Thinking is the mind actively processing these components, constantly testing reality to reconcile the desired image, I want my car, with perceived reality, the car isn't here, where is it? It's an energy-consuming process aimed at achieving satisfaction by adapting to reality, not just automatic discharge.
So the mind is constantly processing, reacting, striving for balance, moving from desire to thought. What's the role of the ego in all this? How does it manage the flux?
The ego-yo, in his German writings, emerges as this crucial regulating force. Its primary job is to contain an elevation of tension, manage and bind cue, prevent the system from being overwhelmed or just reacting reflexively.
Without the ego, just immediate discharge.
Right. No delayed gratification, no complex thought. And the ego's main tool for this self-regulation, this binding of energy, is attention.
What exactly is attention here? Just conscious focus?
It's more fundamental in this model. It's a dynamic mechanism. The ego invests certain neurons with additional cue, like a collateral investment. This binding of free-floating, potentially disruptive energy is critical.
Why critical?
Well, imagine a memory trace unexpectedly releases displeasure, what he called a hysterical proto-pseudos, an early, painful misunderstanding. If the ego's attention isn't actively investing there, it arrives too late. A primary uncontrolled process takes over like a hallucination or symptom formation. This active binding prevents that immediate discharge. It allows thinking to happen, consuming the excess energy in a structured, reality-oriented way. Without attention and binding, the system falls into pathology. Raw primary processes dominate. The ego, through attention, enables complexity and adaptation.
Okay, we've touched on how some psychic stuff doesn't reach consciousness or gets distorted. This leads us right to one of Freud's absolute bedrock concepts, repression, central to understanding neuroses.
Absolutely central. Repression, or denial of translation, as he sometimes put it, is this pathological process where psychic material, painful memories, unacceptable desires, traumatic excitations is actively blocked from conscious awareness.
Not just forgetting, but an active push away.
Exactly. Dynamic, energy-consuming exclusion. And the motive is always the detachment of displeasure, avoiding the pain that would arise if that memory or feeling became fully conscious.
Especially, he thought, for childhood sexual events.
Yes. When those were recalled or reactivated later, they could release this new, unmanageable wave of displeasure, feeling like they were happening now, not in the past. This anachronistic response is key to repression.
But there's a nuance here, right? It wasn't just the event itself.
A crucial nuance in his early thinking. He believed sexual excess alone cannot yet create any repression. For this, the cooperation of defense is necessary.
Meaning the experience isn't enough. There needs to be an active defense.
Yes. An internal psychic defense mechanism, the ego needing to push it away, and conversely, defense without an underlying sexual excess wouldn't produce a neurosis either.
So an interplay between experience and internal defense.
Exactly. And he began to see the different neuroses as arising from different specific sexual scenes and the developmental stages where this interplay happened.
So it's not just what happened, but crucially when it happened developmentally. That determines the type of neurosis.
Absolutely. He theorized this layering of psychic material. Memories aren't just stored, they're rewritten, reprocessed across different life stages.
And if a later rewriting doesn't happen,
then the excitation gets processed according to earlier, more primitive psychological laws from that past period, creating an anachronism, a relic in the psyche, like outdated software running in the background, influencing the present unconsciously.
Which helps explain why neuroses often trace back to early childhood.
Precisely. Especially hysteria. He believed the scenes, often early sexual experiences, real or imagined, happened in the first period of childhood, less than 4 years.
And why is that age so critical?
Because at that age, the capacity for word representations, for verbally processing, articulating, integrating experiences into a logical narrative, just isn't fully formed yet. This lack of verbal translation at the time is what made these memories inaccessible and resistant to conscious processing later.
The excitation remains raw, untranslatable.
Exactly, requiring repression. When reactivated later, they couldn't be processed consciously through language, so the body had to speak what the mind couldn't articulate, leading to those bizarre hysterical symptoms.
And for obsessive neurosis, the scenes were later.
Typically later, yes. During puberty, maybe 8-10 years old. Language and concepts are more developed then, leading to a different kind of symptom more focused on thoughts, rituals, not physical conversions. This chronology was fundamental to his early models.
So how do these repressed elements, these untranslated, charged experiences, actually become symptoms?
Yeah.
What's the connection between the hidden stuff and the overt distress?
Symptoms for Freud are never arbitrary. They are compromise formations.
A compromise between what?
Between the drive of the repressed material to emerge and the ego's defense against it, they're falsifications of memory and fantasies, serving a dual purpose, discharging some repressed energy while simultaneously defending against the full, painful, conscious awareness of the original content.
Leading to different patterns and different neuroses.
Exactly. For hysteria, memories are disfigured, entering consciousness or causing symptoms via displacement by association. The symptom might be symbolic, but the patient is oblivious to its meaning. It's a conversion of psychic energy into a bodily symptom. The body speaks.
And obsessive neurosis.
Here, perverse impulses or unacceptable thoughts are displaced by conceptual similarity. Replaced by something similar but less threatening, a compulsive ritual, like hand-washing for a dirty thought or an intrusive rumination.
And paranoia.
As we discussed, protective poeticizations or fantasies are projected outwards via causal displacement, resulting in delusions. The internal thought is disowned, placed onto the world, transformed into persecution or grandiosity, protecting the ego.
And the nature of compulsion itself differs.
Yes. Hysterical compulsion is incomprehensible, insoluble by thinking, incongruent. Like the tongue-clicking lady doing the opposite of her conscious will. A simple neurotic compulsion, like the person afraid of carriages after falling, is understandable in origin, but still insoluble by thinking. You can't just reason it away.
And the intensity of symptoms.
That hyper-intense nature indicates a quantitative deprivation of Q from the repressed material, suggesting total psychic energy is constant, but its distribution is warped. Too much energy is bound up in the symptom, unavailable for conscious processing.
Beyond the mechanics, how do language and symbolism play a role? How does the unconscious use them to communicate in disguise?
Language is absolutely crucial. Freud noted that obsessive representations often clothe themselves in a peculiar impression of a word in order to allow this multiple use.
Meaning the unconscious plays on words.
Exactly. Using multiple meanings, phonetic similarities, even etymology, to convey repressed content in a disguised way that the conscious mind misunderstands or misses. He famously suggested that coproerotic childhood experiences related to anal fixation, bodily excretions, gave rise to the meaning of words like money.
Money becoming symbolically equivalent to excrement.
Through these deep unconscious word connections and early experiences, yes. The source mentions connections like the Spanish word roñoso, meaning stingy but with connotations of dirtiness. It shows how early experiences can shape our symbolic understanding and language itself in profound, sometimes bizarre ways.
And this extends to addiction.
Yes, the idea of primordial addiction. He identified childhood masturbation as the earliest form of self-soothing tension discharge. Other addictions, later alcohol, tobacco, served as substitutes.
Symbolically replicating the original mechanism.
That was his view, suggesting this deep underlying psychic link between early experiences and later behaviors, all mediated by unconscious processes and symbolic connections. Patterns manifesting in disguised ways throughout life. The unconscious speaks through symbols and linguistic tricks.
Now, Freud famously took these ideas and turned them inward. He analyzed himself. An absolutely unprecedented move.
Groundbreaking, really, to be both analyst and patient.
What did he learn from this auto-analysis? How did it affect his theories?
It was a critical proving ground for him. He openly discussed his own small but very real hysteria, highly enhanced by work. He saw his own struggles as direct manifestations of the dynamics he was studying.
And he documented his own experience.
Meticulously. He described the feeling of internal binding when he got stuck in his self-analysis, feeling unable to advance a thought, access a memory. The same sensation his patients reported when facing resistance.
So he felt the resistance himself.
Exactly. It wasn't just intellectual. He encountered the very forces of repression he was theorizing. It validated his understanding of why patients struggled. It wasn't lack of will, but a genuine psychic block.
And he saw this as essential.
Indispensable for the clarification of the entire problem of neuroses, he said, promised to be of supreme value for his work. It was through this intense self-observation that he uncovered layers of his own unconscious, confirming his hypotheses from the inside out.
And this self-exploration famously led him to dreams, the royal road to the unconscious. How did he start to see their significance, not just random noise?
Not at all. Dreams were, for him, in nous the whole psychology of neuroses. In miniature, they contained the blueprint of the unconscious at work. Falsifications of memory and fantasies. Both past-oriented, reflecting repressed experiences, and future-oriented, embodying disguised wishes. He noted dream consciousness as often discontinuous, bizarre leaps, gaps.
With unconscious intermediate links.
Exactly, links that could only be uncovered through waking analysis. The manifest content, what we recall, is just the surface. A distorted facade hiding the latent content, the hidden meanings, the associative chains connecting to waking life and unconscious conflicts.
Can you give us an example from his own dreams, how he connected the bizarre dream logic to his life?
Yes, there's a famous one. He described a dream summarized simply as bad treatment. Through analysis, he connected this to receiving money from patients for his bad treatment as a doctor.
Okay.
Which immediately drew a striking analogy to his childhood nurse, who he recalled receiving money from him for her maltreatment, maybe neglect or harshness.
Wow. Connecting present anxieties to childhood experiences.
Precisely. It shows how dreams reveal deeply buried connections, childhood issues, complex wish fulfillments, even paradoxical ones linked to punishment or negativity. Demonstrating the counterintuitive nature of the unconscious, he saw these dreams providing the most valuable points of support and clarifications.
And he even linked physical symptoms to dream symbolism.
He did, hypothesizing that hysterical headaches could stem from a fantastic comparison of body parts. A migraine might symbolically represent a violent defloration, making the suffering itself a disguised wish fulfillment situation.
So physical pain as a symbolic expression.
Yes. He also explored regression in dreams, how excitation flows backward in the psychic apparatus. Instead of moving towards action, it regresses towards perception, creating that vivid, hallucinatory quality of dreams that feels so real. That was key to why dreams are so compelling.
So as his theories evolved through self-analysis and dreams, did he stick to his initial idea about actual childhood sexual abuse being the primary cause of neuroses? This seems like a major turning point.
It's the crucial, often controversial evolution. Initially, yes, he emphasized traumatic etiology, literal seduction experiences in childhood. But later, he came to a startling realization. He concluded that many of these recalled childhood sexual experiences weren't literal memories, they were fantasies.
Fantasies created later.
Often products of later periods like puberty, then projected backwards onto early childhood, retrospectively shaping the narrative of trauma. This monumental shift, often mediated by those intricate word connections in patient narratives, moved the emphasis from external literal trauma to the internal psychic reality of the individual.
So it wasn't the objective truth of the event, but its subjective psychic significance.
Exactly. The meaning it held for the individual, even if constructed later, that became paramount.
But he still linked childhood experiences and timing to neurosis types.
He did. Despite the shift to psychic reality, he maintained that connection. For instance, a child bedwetting non-organically up to age 7 must have experienced sexual excitations in early childhood, spontaneous or via seduction. He kept his understanding of how the timing of primal scenes, before 4 for hysteria, puberty for obsessionals, determine the type of neurosis.
So the memory might be a psychic construction, but its untranslated and anachronistic quality remained key.
Yes. This fluidity of memory, where symbolic truth trumped literal truth, became a cornerstone of his developing psychoanalytic method. It opened up a vast new landscape for understanding the mind. #outro.
What an absolutely incredible journey into the early mind of a genius at work, really grappling with the complexities of the human psyche. From Charcot's Salpêtrière and those mysterious conversions of hysteria to the intricate, almost mechanical world of phi, psi, omega neurons.
In that huge shift, right, from literal trauma to the power of internal psychic reality.
Absolutely. Freud laid down the foundational stones for ideas that, well, they continue to shape how we understand ourselves, even today.
Indeed. And this deep dive, it shows us not just the destination psychoanalytic theory as we know it, but the path of discovery itself. Often arduous, circuitous.
Filled with bold, sometimes wild hypotheses, meticulous clinical observations.
And those deeply personal insights from his own autoanalysis. It highlights the constant evolution of his thought. New insights always refining, sometimes radically challenging earlier ideas.
He was constantly wrestling with the unknown, wasn't he? Driven by this incredible curiosity.
And remarkably willing to revise his own cherished ideas when the evidence from patients or himself pointed elsewhere.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what does this all mean for you, our listener, here and now? How do these early, sometimes abstract, Freudian concepts resonate today?
Well, if our minds unconsciously process, rewrite, even create symptoms as these compromise formations or wish fulfillments to manage internal conflicts.
Conflicts often stemming from experiences too painful or too early to consciously grasp.
Right. What does that tell us about the nature of our own subjective reality? How much of your current emotional landscape may be recurring thought patterns or even those unexplained aches and pains? How much might be echoes of untranslated experiences, relics from earlier psychic periods still operating under older rules?
It raises that question, doesn't it? If our past, even forgotten or dismissed, exerts such a powerful disguised influence.
What hidden narratives might be shaping your present? Your choices, your deepest emotional responses, those lingering physical sensations.
And maybe most importantly.
Perhaps most empowering, yeah. How might understanding these hidden dynamics empower you to author a different future, a more conscious, maybe more fulfilling one?
It's a profound reminder, isn't it? That beneath the surface, there's always a deeper story at play.
Always. Waiting to be uncovered.